The headline in the newspaper about today's lesson would read, "Jesus and Peter walk on the lake." It would grab our attention and focus it on what is not only the most startling and exciting part of the passage, we are on the edge of our seats, but also gets to the heart of its message for those of us hearing about it second or third hand. Like the story of Jesus feeding over 5,000 men plus women and children with only 5 loaves and 2 fish, this is a story we are not going to be able to explain. Was this a group hallucination? A post-resurrection story that got inserted into the wrong part of Matthew's gospel? Was it an illusion that Jesus was walking on water when he was actually in the shallow water at the end of the lake? Or, as in the joke that is often told, did Jesus know where the rocks were to help him walk across? None of the above? Well, we can't say for sure. Those who hear it will either accept it or they won't. Again, since we can't answer the question like last week, perhaps that's not the question for us. Perhaps it is more important for us as believers and followers and disciples to ask ourselves instead how we have lived this story in our day and time. To do that, we will need to take a closer look at take a closer look behind the dazzling curtain of miracle. Jesus sends the disciples away in the boat, then dismisses the crowds, and finally gets a chance to be alone, to grieve the death of John the Baptist, to have some peace and quiet, to rest, and to pray. The disciples, on the other hand, get sent away, and though they are experienced boaters, they are fighting a losing battle against the wind and the waves. A short trip is going on, and they don't seem to be getting anywhere. They are anxious and on edge, so when they see a figure walking across the water towards them, they naturally think it's a ghost, something supernatural. Water for them is a place of darkness, of unknown monsters and other frightening and evil powers. The boat, we are told, is being battered by the waves. So perhaps Jesus' trip across the water was more than just showing off God's awesome power. Perhaps he saw them struggling, and this was the only way for him to get there and rescue them. He is the Messiah, after all, and it is his job to be the good shepherd, to care for the sheep, and to save. He calls out to them, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." They recognize his voice. It is not a ghost, after all. It is Jesus. He has come to save them. Now, here is where the story gets really interesting. You may think Jesus walking on water was the highlight of the story, but it's not. At this point, Peter says, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." As believers in Matthew's gospel often do, Peter addresses Jesus as Lord. He says, "If it is you," which could have a bit of doubt in it, or it could mean, since this is you, since it's you and not a ghost, command me. Notice he doesn't ask for supernatural powers to be like Jesus. He asks Jesus to command him to do it, knowing that whatever Jesus commands, Jesus also makes possible. Unless Jesus commands it, nothing unusual is going to happen. Jesus does say, "Come." And Peter gets out of the boat and starts walking on the water towards Jesus. And he's doing it. He couldn't have done it if he hadn't gotten out of the boat. and he wouldn't have gotten out of the boat if Jesus had not commanded him. In other words, Peter wants Jesus to help him do amazing things too. And Jesus does. But Peter has to do his part too. He has to believe in Jesus, and he has to act on that faith by physically moving. When Peter notices again, this always reminds me of Wile E. Coyote in the Roadrunner cartoons, where he finally notices he's run off the edge of the cliff. When Peter notices how strong the wind is and how high the waves are, he becomes frightened and he starts to sink. Come on, Peter, we think. You can do this. Keep believing. Stay up there. But he can't. Lord, save me, he cries out. And immediately Jesus reaches out his hand and catches him and says to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Peter is not a skeptic who is always doubting. Peter is a faithful follower who has become overwhelmed by what is going on around him, begins to lose his nerve. At least he knows enough to ask for help, and he knows the right place to get that help. Lord, save me. And together they get into the boat, and the storm stops, and all is well. And here's the buzz going on in the boat. Here's how the disciples react to what they've just witnessed. Those in the boat say, "Truly, you are the Son of God." The Son of God, the one who saves. They are not commenting on who Jesus is. They're not giving his name. They're talking about what Jesus does. Jesus saves. They've just seen Jesus miraculously feed a hungry crowd, walk on water, calm a storm. They are convinced, those in the boat. They're not talking about how Peter blew it. Maybe they're thinking, I wish I was the one who had asked Jesus to command me to walk on the water, because this Jesus is the real deal, truly the Son of God. That's what those in the boat are thinking. Those in the boat is an interesting phrase. No wonder why Matthew calls them that instead of calling them the disciples. They've been the disciples throughout the story. Well, remember, Matthew isn't writing this story to witness to the disciples, to those disciples. He's writing to those who find themselves in this same boat later. Those in the boat are us, those in the church. As a boat or a ship is often an image used for the church, for those who believe and sometimes doubt and who want Jesus to command them to do as he does, and who are sometimes overwhelmed by what is happening around them. For those who have to leave the safe harbor of their home and venture out into the unknown seas, who need to take risks, to get busy doing things and living their faith in practical, easy-to-see ways, and knowing when to call out for help when it is too much. Immediately, Jesus will reach out his hand and catch us, saying, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" In other words, Jesus says, I'm here. Keep going. I've got your back. If you've never felt Jesus has given you a specific command, well, have you ever asked him to? Are you the one sitting in the boat wishing I'd done that instead of Peter? Have you ever expected something exciting or interesting or even miraculous to happen in God's name through you? It's time to ask. It's time to live your faith. It's time to get out of the boat. Don't be afraid. Jesus is right here. As we read in Romans, the word is near you, on your lips and in your heart. To God be the glory forever. Amen.